This meeting is being recorded.
Shut up, Zoom. With Mr. Are we recording? I think we're recording.
We're recording.
On Thursday, February 16th, 2023 at 4:16 p.m. Eastern time with Mr. Matthew Ehret. And and I know so I don't know what's going on, but this camera, I didn't even know it could. It's been overheating. So this is the second episode I've done today. So at some point during this episode, I would put money on this thing's gonna shut off. I'm still here. Don't worry, don't fret. And I'll just switch to another camera.
You'll be a disembodied voice.
I will. Floating in your ear, speaking wisdom and schizophrenic conspiracy theorists. But with that, so I emailed Matt the other day. I was like, "What's the topic?" And you were like, "UFO Psyops." I was like, "Fuck yeah," because that's exactly what this is. And to take away, I guess, any focus on all the other myriad of horrible things going on, let alone the train wreck Chernobyl in East Palestine, Ohio, which I've been to Ohio twice. The second time was about a day before this happened. So I guess I've got good luck and I left. But I was out there for just visiting a friend. Kid flew back here to Maine the next day. It's like, yeah, do you see what's going on? I was like, holy shit, I was just there. Like, I've never been there before. So guess I don't know. Somebody's planes were foiled.
Is what you're saying. It was your fault, is what you're saying.
It was my fault, or it was a hit against me. They derailed an entire train to bring me down. But with that, dude, yeah, I know, right? What an ego. But with that, Matt, what are the UFO psyops and why now?
Well, I mean, we're pretty much on the same page. I'm assuming the majority of people are probably leaning into our direction already, suspecting, being it that if you're watching your podcast out there in wherever you are in the world, you've probably discovered that the government and intelligence agencies and the mainstream media are not generally something you want to trust. And so when forces representing the highest power structures of mass manipulation, opinion shaping, defense, intelligence are all telling you to look in a certain direction and to think of something in a certain way, like, the fact that the US somehow shot down the F-16, the incredible intrepid F-16 fighters have shot down extraterrestrial beings that came from other galaxies or star systems. I mean, when it took them 4 friggin' days or 5 days to shoot down some weather balloon, that there's probably a reason why they want you looking in that direction, which means it's probably bunk, which means you're probably being psyoped, which means there's other things that you should be looking at. And you just alluded to one of the many things that are big that people should probably have their minds on, which is not just the Palestine, Ohio, but also, there's 4. I was just surprised the other day. I thought it was just a one train wreck of hazardous waste that's like, contaminated now farm regions, one of the most dense farm regions of the world, in Ohio, which is like 75,000 farms and 90% of which are family owned. This 99. Is all been put in,
99.
Holy shit. Well, there you go. So and then you got Texas, you got something similar in South Carolina, you got something in, I think it was Arizona, just like yesterday as well. I mean, this is beyond anomalous. This is obviously, there's an intention behind this. Systemic sabotage, which has been going on now increasingly for the past 3 years of food processing facilities. I think everyone kind of gets a sense that there is an intention to create sabotage. Normally, human beings, being creative problem solvers, would look at a problem and figure out how do they overcome it. But if everyone's obsessed with, Independence Day scenarios from Hollywood that are being like brought to life in in the mainstream media, we're not going to do that. So I think that's probably it.
That's kind of like that's like the creeping sensation I have as well. It's like right when Russia invaded Ukraine, I just remember, I think I said it, I was like, something's odd about how everyone's already on the same like marching orders. And like, I have no vested interest. I don't care. But I was just saying that, I was like, it's weird. Every company is changing their colors to the Ukrainian. I'm like, this just, because I was like, we just came out of COVID. And I'm like, it's odd how immediately there's an enemy. We all have to get on the same line, and if you step out of line, you're evil. And
you're a traitor.
Yeah, and so right now, there's, it just kind of feels like the same marching order, like the balloons are coming. Like, what else is going on? And then, I guess the question is are we doing the sabotaging? Is this World Economic Forum? Is this Great Reset, or are we allowing it to happen, and then at the last hour we'll come in and say we found the evidence that it was China or it was Russia? Are we trying to garner? I feel like we're trying to float hatred for China. I think that's what it is. I think that's why we let the balloon go across. I think we're trying to build up a groundswell of this, and then we can say, oh my goodness, and clutch our pearls and say China's doing this, and everyone will be whipped up into a frenzy, and we got to go to war with China. And it won't be for 20 years, just like with WMDs, that we look back and say, oh, we were corralled and misled. But
Yeah.
I feel like that's where it's going. So to, I guess, to throw it back to you, what do you think this is? Do you think this is intentional sabotage on our part, or is this a foreign state actually doing, I guess, a form of modern warfare against us, doing full spectrum kinetics?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is a giant piece of theater being
Okay.
cooked up by Anglo-American intelligence, which has built up a sort of an intellectual environment within the mass psyche over the course of many decades of effort, which we saw in the 1950s, 60s. You know, it was sort of like an anything goes war on the minds and morals and culture of the people throughout the Cold War, because everything was justified if it was to stop, you know, the commies. Even if it meant working with, we talked about this last time you and I chatted last month, you know, even if it meant working with the worst virulent Nazis and fascists that were never punished after World War II, but were absorbed into Western intelligence agencies to carry out war against the people, which was justified because, you know, you want to keep the people in a state where they are looking for the embrace of the state to protect them from commies. So you had things like the Red Brigades, other terrorist, Maoist, Leninist organizations deployed by MI6, the CIA, overseen and protected by the FBI, infiltrating, taking control of Black Panthers, other groups that are trying to radicalize different minority groups and turn them against the state. In some cases, like these idiot Maoist, Leninist psychopaths in the Weather Underground or the FLQ of Montreal would plant letter bombs in civilian mailboxes, just again to create a climate of fear. And ultimately, the effect was always what was key, which is to drive the people into desiring that the state protect them. And the states were increasingly taken control or taken over by those same supranational entities that always wanted to destroy, undo the American Revolution, undo the Renaissance that emancipated so many of the human beings who were formerly talking cattle under feudalism and medievalism. So they wanted to regressively go back to that, like, utopic, they call it utopic, it's really dystopic, like feudal structure of everyone knows their place, masters and slaves. And so the Chinese and the Russians were good targets of hate and fear for decades. For a while, that simmered down when you know, the New World Order was declared in '92, and you know, there was a big celebration. Huh?
91. Don't forget, on September 11th, 1991.
Oh yeah, these dates, they like these
Just
numerological
that's
dates,
just a
right?
whatever. You know,
Yeah,
just 10 years to the day.
coincidence. Yeah.
Yeah, just sweep that
So,
under the rug.
so people kind of, like, you know, they went to sleep a little bit with a complacency that was satisfactory to the elites. But then, you know, as soon as Russia, China, India, other countries stopped playing along the way they were supposed to with this entire, you know, post-human script that was put online, looked so pretty on paper back in the early '90s. All of a sudden now you have to reawaken, you know, revive the latent unresolved fear, paranoia of the commie thing that was built up in the psyche over decades. That's been revived now, and they're playing it like you would a situation of hypnosis. You know, you could just like plant certain seeds into the subconscious and then revive them, or like a Manchurian Candidate, but for the mass, the collective. So they're playing us right now, and you're right. I mean, they're trying to get us to fear and hate China, and every little thing that they do, whether it's weather balloons that we're told are spy balloons, part of their, which the Financial Times just wrote an article where they did the forensics, and I was always telling people, like, don't freak out and stop calling it a Chinese spy balloon until you get the forensics. They shot it down. Now they have to actually show what the thing is that they've shot down. They had to actually admit that that it was collecting atmospheric data, which then they say can be used for guiding missiles to attack us. But it's like, wait a minute, you just said its purpose was to collect atmospheric data, and the Chinese said it was a weather balloon collecting atmospheric data that got pulled off course. So you're basically saying that the Chinese are right. there's no evidence of any Chinese military balloon program, but all of a sudden that's now a thing. And now you're saying unidentified aerial phenomena or objects are attacking us from Canada that are supposedly, you're just alluding in your language that's obviously being deployed by China and maybe Russia. It's like, what is this? There's no evidence of any of this stuff that's anything more than just theater.
There's also just like no need for continuity. This isn't like a season where the episodes need to make sense. It's just it doesn't matter. 3-4 years ago, riot in the street because Trump's going to bring us to war, nuclear war against Russia, and we're gonna aid the Nazis.
Yeah.
Fast forward to we're aiding the Nazis, tiptoeing towards nuclear war with Russia.
Yeah.
But here's why that's a good thing. Trump can say we need a ban on China. We need to call it the China virus, and that can be seen as xenophobic. Give it 6 months tops, and everyone will have just the equivalent of like, stand tall against China. There's going to be like, they released COVID. They launched a balloon over us. They knocked over a train in East Palestine. Make no mistake, they will do exactly, because think of how insane it is now that we're aiding Nazis going into nuclear war with Russia, which is what they feared Trump would do. But not only is there no pause, it's stunning and brave.
Mm-hmm.
Make no mistake, we will be on a war footing with China before the end of the year, and everyone will rally behind it. Never once giving pause to the fact that they just said Trump was a xenophobe for bringing that up. Biden will float it, and we're going to go with it, hook, line, and sinker. And it might even be that we're doing the sabotaging here. It's not the World Economic Forum. It's us, and we're going to false flag it and say it was China. And that's going to lead to us. It'll be another proxy. It will start in Taiwan. It'll be Taiwan, Ukraine. And it'll probably stay there for like the rest of 2023. But we're going to keep building it up. And then there will be a Gulf of Tonkin moment. And that is when we are going to escalate into us going into war with China and Russia. And it'll be 2001 all over again. It'll be you're either with us or you're against us. That's kind of that's today's February 16th. That's my, I'm putting that bet down. I'm going all in on that.
That's definitely I would be lying if I said that was not a scenario which geopolitical strategists have cooked up, thought about very seriously, and is a variable shaping our future right now as we speak. Because it definitely is. And I mean, I was listening to Gilbert Doctorow, who's a pretty astute analyst on RT, and he was commenting that it seems as though currently the Rand Corpians, that whole breed of statistical game theorists, game modelers, who've wargamed all sorts of different scenarios of how to go about the Russia-China problem, because Russia and China have both become a problem. They both have expelled George Soros. They both have cracked down on the CIA and NED, the National Endowment for Democracy operations that have been like maintaining fifth columnists in both of those countries for quite some time. So, and they've both started moving in a sort of harmonized way with a variety of other Eurasian nations towards a type of approach to the current collapse function, which is slapping into us, which is not controlled by the IMF, World Bank, City of London, death cult. And so the problem that they're dealing with is, okay, well, how do we take the assets that we currently have and get them to get back on the program that they had promised that they would be on back in the 90s or the 80s? And so part of that, what Gilbert Doctorow was saying is, he thinks, and I think there's reason to think that this is legit, they want to try to amp up the tension and the danger, the threat of nuclear war to a max, a boiling point. And the idea is that you could psychologically, it's like playing nuclear chicken, who's going to psych out first. And they believe that Russia, China increasingly will break. They can break their will out of the fear of a nuclear global exchange and force them to the table. The discussion table may be arranged by, let's say, the Vatican, under Pope Francis or something like that. And then the terms of the solution could be then dominated or led by the Western technocrats, and Russia, China will just acquiesce to carving themselves up, you know, the ways that Zbigniew Brzezinski wanted back in the 90s into like 14 micro federations of little mini ethno-nationalist blocks in Russia under the IMF. China would do the same. They'd willingly just like carve themselves up into these like little micro states. There's like think tanks have circulated these different pictures that it's sort of their wet dream fantasy of China, what they should have been, of just this much more subdued, broken up, balkanized state with like, you know, Xinjiang as its own federation, and Tibet is their own independent federation, and Southern Mongolia, aka Northern China, is its own like ethnic national group, and then Taiwan and Hong Kong as their own two separate states. And then China's like, you know, maybe a third of the current geography of it. So they really want this wet dream. I don't think they're gonna, but they're delusional too, right? Because they don't realize that China and Russia are not going to sacrifice their culture, their people. They're just not going to do it. But they're imposing they're projecting themselves. They're like, I would do it. I'm because they're like, you know, weak, degenerate, immoral, unprincipled psychopaths with no depth or character or substance. So they're like, I presume everybody's just like me. And yeah, if they were, maybe you'd win. Maybe that program would actually work. But in this case, Russia and China have demonstrated they have hypersonic missiles that can go 25 times faster than the speed of sound, that could take out any capital in the world that tries to declare war on you or launch a nuclear preemptive strike, which is what Biden has reserved the right to do, is to actually, he revived the Obama doctrine of permitting nuclear first strikes against even non-nuclear targets. That's something that has affected the Russian calculus quite a bit in the last year. You know, that's where Putin said, you know, if we have to use nuclear weapons, we'd rather not. But if we're existentially threatened, Putin said, well, we will. And everybody in the West was like, see, he's threatening us with nuclear war. He is the demon. And it's like, wait a minute, context, people, context. He said that in regards to what?
Like, wasn't that like one of the first things Biden did was he made this 3 deep line of island-based, like short or medium range nuclear tipped missiles, like right when he took, I forget what I think they called it the Pacific Defense Initiative. It went right under the radar. I remember bringing it up, and like right after I was like, this is kind of insane. Like it's like 3 rings deep. I think starting past like Hawaii. It's like however far, I don't know, 1,000 miles each. And it was just, we'll rain nuclear hell on you if like you move out of South China Sea. And it just right under the radar. No one touched it. I still have yet to read a story on it. It's just like, this is kind of hardcore. Like,
no, I know. Well, he really revived the Obama, you know, Asia Pacific, the pivot to Asia doctrine, which involved, you know, Obama, well, as Hillary, who was the architect of it in 2010, that basically said, okay, well, we've done what we could in the Middle East as far as asymmetric warfare is concerned, but China is now trying to be their own thing. They're not going along with what we're telling them to as much anymore. So let's start putting some pressure on China. And they amped up like crazy, you know, investments, military equipment. There's 100,000 U.S. troops in the Pacific around China's backyard. 50,000 or 40,000 are in Japan. It's a captured state since World War II. 28,000 are in South Korea, captured state since the Korean War. Taiwan has always been a military-industrial toy until the Kuomintang of 2013, 2014 became the party of sanity of Taiwan, the former party of Sun Yat-sen and Chiang Kai-shek, and they arranged a free trade agreement with China, who is by far their biggest trading partner. So China has like, economically, they got the center of magnetism by far, more than the US does with any of these Asian countries. Even South Korea, double the trade with China than they do with the US. But so, and they were about to finalize this free trade agreement at the same time that Yanukovych in Ukraine was about to finalize a free trade agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union run by Putin, and back out of the whole integration into the EU. And at the same time, same year, 2014, the NED goes into effect in both countries, unleashes a color revolution that unseats the Kuomintang, saying that they're authoritarian against the will of the people. But it's like, what are these people when you actually look at them? And they put in their own hodgepodge of weird, I mean, they got like a transhumanist, transsexual culture minister of culture who openly doesn't believe in reality. And that's her, he, she, whatever it is wants to spread the gospel of unreality because they only believe in this matrix digital world. And that's the Minister of Culture of Taiwan, put in by the United States, receiving command and order by the United States, and signing deals, military deals with like Lockheed Martin and other when even the US State Department acknowledges on their website that Taiwan is still a part of China. So you're like, what is this? most Americans even still think Taiwan's its own country and China's going to invade. But at the same time, it's not the same thing as Ukraine because, you know, China has legally, it is part of China. Ukraine was not legally part of Russia. It's also sea locked, so it would be much easier for China if they wanted to just create like an economic barricade and prevent goods to flow in and just basically choke out the traders. That's possible. And there's a lot of people like in Taiwan, it's not as militarized as of a culture as Ukraine was, as far as like the Nazi romanticism that maintained these like, you know, anyway, we know what that is. In Ukraine, Taiwan, it's a much more fluffy, soft culture, kind of like Japan in that sense. It's kind of like Germany too. Like, you know, Germany is also being used as 50,000 troops U.S. stationed in Germany, right? Total hostage state since World War II. But at the same time, they don't have that Nazi hardcore, like destroy the Slavs and the intervention. They don't have that culture anymore. It's a big fluffy, you know, mushy culture. So even if they have the third biggest military, it's not as much of a threat in Germany as it was back in the 40s or 30s. But Ukraine is much more renegade and hardcore. Estonia, a lot of these Eastern European countries, Moldova has increasingly a Nazi romanticism that they're currently trying to play with. So there's all these like little spark plugs. Kosovo, they're trying to like light that on fire too, to create more conflict between Serbia and Kosovo. And Moldova, they're trying to get them into NATO as well and break their peace constitution. So they're desperately trying to just light fires everywhere. But I think in my mind, it's only because they don't have that much to work with. They played the majority of their cards on the Ukraine gamble, which I think I honestly do think that those who planned out that or gamed out that Ukraine scenario believe that they would be able to economically destroy Russia already months and months ago, according to the sanctions, according to their plans to use the Russian fifth columnists to kill Putin. And, you know, John Bolton was celebrating this sort of thing. Nothing has really worked out the way their ivory tower gaming has said it would. So that's good. But again, a wounded, desperate beast is not like a safer animal to be around either. So I don't really know. They're throwing UFOs at us now. Shit, like I don't know.
It is hitting kind of like a fever pitch. Like the fact that like Biden officials are coming out and they're like, I saw a post like right before we started this, and it was like Biden determining whether or not to address the nation on like UFOs or something. Like, and I'm just like, that's like not a trivial statement. Like. And it's just, I mean, you have like normies now commenting under like every Twitter thread of like a new food processing plant going up. You have the average person going, these are not coincidences. We are barreling towards like, you know, like coming out of a pandemic, we are just like edging like there was just an incursion in US airspace 2 weeks ago from coast to coast over our ICBM silos. When's the last time that's happened? Sputnik? Maybe. I mean, these are like once in 70-year events that are
happening every day, right? Like
yes. Like this is not, and like I don't know, if like my own anxiety, I kind of have to just like not fully take it in. I just have to like look at it and nod and just, you know, go about my day. Like, well, I gotta go get groceries and do my laundry, like just so I don't implode. But these are like not trivial things going on. And I can't help but whatever it is that we're seeing, the train derailments, the balloons, it's not whatever it is. I think we have learned over the last 5 years, specifically the last 23 years, whatever it is, we're not seeing what it really is. We'll know in 10 years, but time and time again, we have seen whatever narrative is going right now. It's not the narrative. The result of the propaganda is what the narrative is what the true intentions are. If they start whipping this up if you start seeing headlines floated like, you know, intelligence officials floating ideas that Russian mercenaries derailed the train, then you can see where it's going.
Yeah.
And I just don't think whatever the story is that we're getting, why would it? We didn't get the truth told about Ukraine or COVID. Why would they start now?
Well, the hazardous waste train derailments and these things, that is something which I've got to admit, I still haven't fully wrapped my mind around it. I don't know many people. I don't think anybody has. I mean, I've got my hypotheses, and I think a big one, like we alluded to, is the farming issue and the war on food, the creation of scarcity. That's definitely going down hard right now. There's been a bit of a blackout on the media level, though. Very few media outlets have really covered this thing in any serious way. And then on top of that, you got this weird stuff that just this week, a few of my contacts were sending me. I mean, you've probably seen it, like reminders that Netflix had, aired back in December 2022, a film called White Noise, with like the scenario being a train carrying toxic waste in a place that looks like Ohio. Actually, it was filmed in
it was filmed
Palestine, Ohio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, it was filmed in East Palestine, Ohio.
The people who live in that town were extras on the film set of that movie, featuring a train carrying toxic waste going up in smoke, and everybody having to evacuate.
Didn't the CDC change their Twitter banner to vinyl chloride like 2 weeks before this happened?
What are you talking about? I didn't hear about this. What?
Yeah.
No.
Like
what?
Yeah, they like changed their like Twitter or on like the website. They just changed it to some like the chemical structure of like chloride. Like,
really?
Are we just being gaslit at like a level that's never, or are we like finally, are we cracking the veil? Are we like all the like Alex Jones isn't crazy enough? Is it like the predictive programming is real?
Yeah.
Is it just meant to make us look like total crazy people for pointing this out?
Well, yeah, it's probably never just one thing. It's a dynamic. Reality is a dynamic thing. It has multiple effects on multiple levels every time you do something in reality. So I mean, part of it is like we've been accustomed to living in or adapting to a world of false narratives created by creative writers associated with intelligence agencies that produce scenarios that are then turned into media by Mockingbird Media. And that was like Project Mockingbird became public back in the 70s, of the CIA capture of almost every single print and televised media outlet in the world. And we're like, oh yeah, but then that stopped in 1976 with the Church Committee. No. Yeah, right. Okay. They were
Stop it, you guys. And they said, okay.
Yeah. I mean, come on. So now and then coming out of like Vietnam, we acknowledge, okay, Gulf of Tonkin, that was a lie. Okay, we went and killed millions of Vietnamese and 50,000 plus of our own, soldiers, young people whose lives were destroyed, turned into drug addicts that were brought back into the West to feed a new drug culture in the 60s and 70s. We did that all based on a lie of the Gulf, that the North Vietnamese somehow attacked a boat that didn't get attacked, and that was justifying this unleashing. Northwoods, we know that Kennedy was at war with his generals, and like Lyman Leibnizer saying, like, yeah, let's just bomb a jet full of like American citizens and we'll blame it on the Cuban.
We'll do shootings in like Miami and shit. Yeah, which is
yeah. And then you had like the Committee of Assassinations that was affiliated with the Church Committee back in 1975 or 76, and they even proved back then an actual congressional committee that John F. Kennedy, Fred Hampton, Martin Luther King were all killed in it, and the cover-up was managed by the CIA, who was directly implicated. That was a congressional conclusion in the 70s as part of the Church Committee. That's on congressional record, and we just were told, no, go back to sleep, people. And then, when a little bit of time elapsed, then all of a sudden, some girl comes on the TV in 1991, tearing up because she's a nurse in Iraq, and she had to watch Saddam Hussein's minions killing babies. Yeah, and then we find out after we bombed the hell out of Iraq in Desert Storm that, oh no, she was actually the daughter of the Iraqi ambassador and never was a nurse, and just made things up that were given to her by the CIA. And then we did it again with the Dodgy dossier, and like that was completely made up by MI6, given to Colin Powell, and never were there any evidence at all of a yellow cake from Niger bought by Saddam Hussein, who really got it bad, poor idiot. So I mean, and every single time, people get out and you get a little mini burst of indignation and some protest on the streets, and then wait a little bit longer, and the majority of those people who were protesting in 1991 or 2002 or 2003 against these bombing campaigns, a few years later, they're the ones like wearing Ukraine flags and on their vests, championing their great liberalizing hero Biden to pour more weapons into Ukraine as part of a proxy war with Russia. Like, I mean, fuck, no memory. I'm sounding a bit cynical right now, but it is like,
no, it's what it is. There's no memory. There's no
goldfish.
One plus one does not equal two every day, and it's and I am between this like constantly like weaving in and out of like, am I black pilled and nihilistic, or am I just sort of like white pilled and now I'm just like sort of watching this like you would watch a sports game, and I'm like, the brainwashers are really doing good now. Like, I don't, because like you can't go insane, you can't go full black pill, because that's the end of your life. But like there's also like a reasonable amount of like, come on, this is like $1 trillion defense propaganda intelligence banking it. Like, what am I really doing? Like, I'm not David to Goliath. Like, I'm aware of that's not being pessimistic. It's just being realistic. I don't know like what else there is to do aside from just, I don't know, just talk about it on a podcast and try to get some laughs out of it. Like, what other constructive thing is there to do? Like,
well, I mean, I think the important thing for me, at least, because I often think like, well, what can little me do? And I don't really, I got to accept what I can change and accept what I can't change too, But I know that there's an ability that I have that makes me happier when I'm trying to go outside of my limits, go into my uncomfortable zone, discover new ways of thinking, we talked about this last time.
yeah.
We're on the same page there, like whenever we're getting better at going into the unknown and developing capacities on any level, I'm a happier person. I got more to hold on to inside of myself, more inner peace, and more ability to look at evil. Because that's the thing, like a lot of people just don't want to look at evil because they're thinking like they just feel disempowered, and they're like, well, psychologically, if it is that bad, I couldn't do anything about it anyway, so I'd rather not know and just be happier living my little mini micro life, which is what most people told themselves for a few decades. And then, COVID comes slamming into us, more hardcore medical dictatorship. They're pressuring our kids to get, injected with gene therapy. And people are realizing now, well, maybe that wasn't really the right idea to try to like put my blinders on and think small. Maybe I should have been, practicing the harder lifting mind muscles this whole time, and now they're trying to catch up. So all I know is we have to try to, if we are working at making ourselves better, at being better amplifiers of truth communicators, but also receivers, like receive and communicate, the potential to be role models and to play a role, especially in a situation where, let's say, a responsibility falls into our lap that we wouldn't be prepared for otherwise. Because some people, you'd be surprised, like the circumstances of life sometimes present you with an opportunity that if you've prepared yourself, you could pick up that sword or whatever and actually carry out a fight. But if somebody could give you a sword and you've never like thought about what this thing is, you wouldn't know what to do with it, right? And I'm here talking about somebody who might be given the opportunity to become like, a union president, or run for office as a candidate for something, or to speak up at a town hall meeting, or to whatever, right? Like there's so many different things and different amplitudes that people could rise to the occasion. But then like my wife and I were just talking and thinking about this depressing situation. There was this video of like a Black Lives Matter violent couple of kids just shouting, like maybe 17, 18 years old, really making a bit of a rise. And you had like a bunch of like lame office workers sitting at a fountain in a park just eating their sandwiches, and like you got these groups shouting Black Lives Matter and all this stuff, and some little lady meekly says like, all lives matter, and one of them walks up to her, punches her in the face, knocks her out while she's eating her sandwich. And you have all these other office workers, this is the scary thing, who are just sitting there looking away and just eating their sandwich. There's probably like 40 people in this park, and they all just like watch this guy knock this woman out, and nobody does anything. And it's like, what type of society, how far do you have to collapse as a civilization that type of thing happens?
Yeah.
Right. And that's just a small level of like, would I do that? No, I'd like to think that I would probably not be one of those sandwich munchers were that to happen. That being said, on many levels, you got to think, well, what would I do if I was in like a situation of JFK or Martin Luther King being confronted with something serious? Would I be able to do something similar to their type of courage, or would I like meekly do the other thing? So I think we just have to follow our conscience in that sense. And if shit hits the fan and our civilization goes into a hardcore downslide, as it's been sort of moving towards, it could get really ugly. At the very least, we know it wasn't our fault. It didn't happen because of anything we did or didn't do. And at the same time, if there is a miracle that can happen, and like a moral awakening could begin to start, like moving it in a better orientation, well, then we know that we played a role in participating in that amplification in that direction. That's as best as I could say. I could think about it.
Well, somebody, and this is again new for me, that I've been doing live shows, and somebody commented, at some point I want you and Matt to talk about something positive about this, because this is exhausting to listen to on an emotional level. And I'm just now looking at it, and I'm realizing that I had brought that up without even looking at that question. I'm like, what can we do? So whoever commented that, I'm with you. There it is. And I think Matt said it correctly, is you can put the blinders on and not pay attention to it for a little bit, right? You can ignore a bad grade or a bill or like weight gain or excessive drinking. You can ignore it for like, a couple days, maybe a couple weeks. But reality does start come knocking. It does, right? Eventually you can ignore the check engine light on your car until one day it doesn't start. Like one day reality, it goes, hey fucker, I'm home. And you gotta go, oh shit. And that is when reality. And so for a while, on a geopolitical level, instead of a couple weeks, you can do that for a couple of decades. You can go, whatever. I got my 9 to 5, right? I'm just, NATO's encroaching. What am I doing? I'm working at I'm assembling cars in Michigan. Like, what do I have to do with NATO? All right. But, eventually the effects of a politically apathetic and uninformed public does come to your front door. It comes to your front door in the form of a gain of function virus that did spawn out of this mad machine of power and pharma, military, intelligence, banking, that you have in part been complicit by ignoring it. And like you said so beautifully, as scary as it can be to start like looking behind the veil, and I get it, it's not, even now during this podcast, like my heart rate's going up. Like I would much rather just be playing Ace Combat on my Xbox. Like, but right, it will come knocking. And the more you start to look at it, it's scary at first, but like a workout, like adding more weights in the gym, it starts to get a little easier. And it's not that it's getting easier, it's that you're getting stronger. And then you can add another weight to it, and you can start looking at it, and you start like, okay, JFK probably was whacked by our intelligence community. You're like, that's a big one. And okay, but then you work forward from there, and you're like, well, Tonkin was probably horseshit. And you're like, okay, then, my uncle served, and you're like, okay. And then, you move to 9/11, and then you move to like the 08 financial crisis, and you move to COVID. And there is a groundswell that can occur. And it's not just idealism. Like, enough people wake up and start demanding answers. I mean, what we're seeing right now, like, YouTube bans one person, no one cares. But when enough people leave and go, fuck it, we're going to start Rumble. We're going to start BitChute. People flock to it. So you don't even need the majority of people to have some sort of courage. You just need a handful. And then the normies that had their blinders on, they'll quickly follow you. Because if all they have to do is go sign up a Rumble account, they're fine with that. They don't want to be some intrepid pine. And that's fine. They just go, I'm going to keep working at my job, but I'm going to use Rumble now because they don't censor, or they have a downvote button or whatever. Like it is always good to move towards the truth. And like you said, move towards it with your conscience.
Yeah. Well, it's like this balance question, right? Like the good is always good. Now the good has different degrees of amplitude, and so we often get a little bit paralyzed. And I've been through this by just thinking about the grandeur of a lot of the problems of our history, of our past, the factors of the challenges, pushing on our future in a bad way. And it's kind of like, it's stifling. And you're like, unless I can, and we make the mistake of thinking, unless I can solve all of that, I can't move. And it's like, no, just relax. Don't skip steps, like you have to think about um, doing good is all about, again, it's capacity building. You know, like you got to develop certain ways of just being able to have a patience with yourself, the ability to enjoy new things. You know, like obviously we've been given a lot of, the Chinese had what was called the Opium Wars. That was a spiritual war to destroy their people in the 19th century. Continued on a little bit afterwards, run by the British. The modern incarnation of that is partially still the same thing, still the same drug culture, which has now a few different aspects to it, popularized, even like dominated by the state. You know, so you got that, but also you have the, there's the military industrial complex created a video game addiction culture, porn addiction, like all sorts of things. Little like Twitter itself came out of the military industrial complex, DARPA, and there are people who thought about destroying your capacity to use your concentration span, which is a precondition to developing a relationship with memory, your mind. How do you use your creativity in a more healthy and better way in time? Because it can always get better or get worse. And the mind is it's a metaphysical process. It obviously needs a brain, but it is not the brain. The mind is more than the brain, because the brain doesn't account for how you can develop a metaphor or an allegory or something like nonlinear of that sort, right? So they can heal it very quickly as well. Don't get demoralized there just because we've been, maybe got TikTok brains and stuff, because that happens. But despite that, we have to take stock of like, what do we need? What are our the vices? What are the virtues we want to cultivate? And Ben Franklin, I would say, for people who want to like get a handle on this, read Ben Franklin's autobiography. It's a very short read, and he wrote it in as clear, transparent of a way. You could read this in probably like 2 afternoons, and he takes you through the process of his own development process, because he wants to create sort of a guidepost or a guidebook on how do you willfully take ownership of your own pathway of development and take stock of what you need to grow on. And it's really good. And he's very funny about it too. And he's the guy who like organized he's the father of the founding fathers in that sense. Like he's not just a nobody. He discovered laws of the universe in the forms of electromagnetism and found ways of pulling people into a better relationship with the universe by organizing new inventions and discoveries around the fire of the gods. That was formerly something that just like burned down your villages and scared people. But he broke people out of that, which was integrated in his concept of creating a society premised upon an harmony of natural law politically. So it was not separate in his mind, his work on the physical scientific discoveries and the metaphysical political discoveries. There were two parts of the same thing. And he just knew that people are not going to take him. He would not have as much impact or effect on the political world that he dreamed of bringing into being if he could not demonstrate something that nobody else could do. So he focused with an unbroken concentration for several years on the challenge of the curiosity of the nature of electricity what is this lightning? And all of the other effects of that. He also discovered the Gulf Stream, other things too. So a lot of the great discoverer or the great minds who are exceptional people who don't fit into the mediocrity of the norms are people you want to read. Like look to those people who made real discoveries. Don't read about them, because you're going to find a lot of like opinionators and expert commentators who want you to take their opinion of what the great minds are. Don't do that. You just go straight to what, read Ben Franklin's own essays or his autobiography. Read Lincoln's speeches. A lot of them are available. Get a sense of their character. Don't read about them first. Read them first. And then you start seeing that, or Martin Luther King speeches. Listen to Martin Luther King, whatever's available that you can. They shot this guy at the age of 38 for a reason, and they don't like shooting individuals. They don't mind killing millions of people. That's the point I always try to make to people too. The oligarchy is perfectly happy killing millions of people. They really would rather not kill individuals, because when they have to do that, it shows a weakness in the structures of the machine, which they would rather keep hidden, which is that an individual who is like not even high bred, but just like, a regular person could awaken something in themselves that presents such a challenge to the structures of the oligarchical machine that they can do nothing but kill that person, whether it's a JFK, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. And when you read or listen to the speeches or read the transcripts of JFK or Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, especially the last year of Malcolm X's life, you start seeing it's the same damn thing that was awakening the heart of Lincoln as his identity was concerned. Ben Franklin, it's the same thing. And you find as you're doing that, something of that is also being awoken inside of you, right? So it's like it's this property of what makes humans humans that the oligarchy is afraid of and they despise, because the machines and animals don't do that. Like, perfect talking, like cows or wolves will not have a relationship of their great grandparents and like read their writings or think about what they're leaving behind for their great unborn grandchildren. Wolves just won't do that. And so they want us to behave like the law of the jungle, like good little wolves or cows or machines that are just programmed with like blank slates, or just programmed by the architects. But they hate it when we do this other thing, because it makes us become more in tune with what our true nature. We know ourselves. We end up discovering more and more what we are, and we end up tapping into powers of creative thought and creative action associated with those good thoughts that create nonlinear effects that even surprise us. And I think today, when you look at the reason why we're not dead yet, that's what I would say. Like, if the oligarchy had the type of power that they want us to believe that they have, then we'd already, in my mind, we'd already be dead. We'd already be a depopulated society of slaves without access to any of the thoughts that you and I have access to and are communicating about right now. So the very fact that we have this going on means that they can't have the type of power that a lot of people attribute that they have. And I think that that's another point that you have to think people should, if they're listening on YouTube, think about, like, well, what is that? What don't they control such that, why haven't they won yet? What are the challenges that the oligarchy is afraid of? What are their weak spots? Where are those dynamics in the world today that are challenging their new world order script? Because they're there. And these are good exercises to just work through. Even though, unfortunately, in our part of the world, I'm in Canada, you're in the US. I don't know where
I'm in Maine.
You're in Maine. Yeah, we got a lot of stupidity around us. A lot of Europeans don't have we don't have a lot of JFK-like characters in our political spectrum to be inspired by. But the world is a big place that's bigger than the little transatlantic community. So what's going on outside of this little field of the world? And for me, I've published a series of books going through the how did George Soros get purged from Russia in 2015? How did he get purged from China in 1989? How did that happen? What are the fifth columnists and deep state operations in Russia and China? What about Persia? How are there patriots? Are there good people? Are there nationalists who have used political power to fight against this oligarchy that's wanted to destroy those cultures as much as they've wanted to destroy ours? Fuck yeah, sure. There's those things. And have these patriots and moral intelligentsia been able to carry out a fight against the traitors? Yeah, they've done some good stuff. They haven't totally succeeded, but I mean, they're fighting and they've done a better job than we have. Yeah. So maybe what they're doing is something that actually scares the oligarchy that we should be learning from in some ways.
I like what you said about, yeah, they don't want you to awaken something inside of you. It's like what I always said about one of my buddies was a bodybuilder, and you'd always want to make up, you'd be like, he's on steroids. He wasn't. You'd be like, oh, that's all he does. He doesn't have a life. No, he still had a life. And finally, you'd come to the realization that what you don't like is he could do it. He's just a human, which means I could do it, which means that I too could have a 6-pack abs and bulk. And you go, oh, and then that's holding up a mirror to you. That's making you realize that, right? You go, oh, fuck, this guy isn't taking shortcuts. He's just working harder than me. And we don't like that. But if you can stare at the truth long enough, you can go, yeah, I can do that too. I just got to start doing push-ups, like slow and steady. It'll take several years, but you can start. And I think that's what you're saying is like that an MLK can just arise and start giving speeches and going on marches. They don't like seeing that, because what we eventually see is much like the bodybuilding. We all kind of come to the realization that, oh, I could do that. And that's just one guy. What if 2 guys did it? What if 50 guys did it?
Yeah.
They don't want that. They have to reach out and they have to squash it. And they don't like doing that either, right? The same reason why Twitter doesn't mind banning a topic, but they don't like having to take down an individual account, because now you're like, oh, you had no argument, so you just had to pull the plug. And they go, oh, okay,
Yeah.
right? And they don't like that. So I guess that I think you always just have to remember that, like, you spoiler alert, we all die, right?
Yeah.
And no matter what fear you have about standing up and doing the right thing, and I don't mean advocating like we're all gonna die anyway, so let's take up. And that's not what I mean at all. Legally, that is not what I mean at all. What I mean is, like, I have to be very clear about that, because there's somebody listening to this who's like,
Disclaimer.
you tell me when and where, Tommy. I'm like, no. There's someone who I'm pretty sure is a Fed who posted on one of my videos last week. He goes, the only solution is lone wolves. I just said, fuck off, Fed. But like, no, you have to remember that we all die no matter what. And, you know, just do the right thing. And you don't even have to be MLK. It can simply start with, don't put your head in the sand. When something's a little uncomfortable, and you go, they are burning down all the food processing plants. Okay, let that initial wave of anxiety come over you. Let it pass. Go to the gym. Go take a hot shower. All right. Now start to examine it critically. Start to find other people talking about it. And if no one else is talking about it, start the conversation. And just start to, you're an individual neuron. Start trying to just link up with other nodes and just see what happens. There's a synergistic effect that you don't know what's going to happen when 3 of you start putting your minds together. You don't know what happens when 3,000 of you. Something can arise from that. And that is kind of the importance, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, there's so many cases to study, to think about. You know, we had the Canadian truckers convoy as a small case study of how this works. It didn't become the movement in the way that we'd hoped it would, but it was still not expected. It broke the mold, and it awoke something very organic, very natural in humanity. That did have reverberations in policy that were unexpected across the board. You know, like the very fact that the entire COVID draconian restriction regime was pulled back upon, like at the same, directly in the wake of that process, is not a coincidence. But despite that, there's two types of dynamics, right? There's no silver bullet to this process. There's been 50 plus years of cultural decay, mediocrity that's become normalized over the course of, I mean, several generations. That's a type of spiritual self-mutilation that is very unnatural. It doesn't heal immediately. We have to have the patience to think a little bit long-term, right? The oligarchy thinks long-term. So we should at the very least be able to think on a temporal basis like the oligarchy. They think deep past, they think deep future. They don't think about immediate effects. That's part of the oligarchical cultural standards. And in that sense, you could say in some ways, the oligarchy has access to more morality than your average Joe Schmo Canadian American, who often has been induced to think in a very small-minded, live in the now sort of way. They don't make their decisions based upon a consideration of forces that are far beyond their lifespan. Now, they're evil. Don't get me wrong. The oligarchy is Luciferian evil shit.
That being said, they are psychopathic demonic pedophiles. But
yes.
But even a broken clock is right twice a day, and you too should look at long term. No, yeah, but really.
But what you said about the mortality thing is key, and I think that there's a piece that comes with the fact, not running away, but really just coming to terms with the fact of our mortality. We're going to be old. We're going to be wrinkly. I mean, at some point, a lot of the pleasures we have today in our youth are not necessarily, we shouldn't take for granted, are going to be there when we're 80, 90 years old. So the question is, when we're 80, 90 years old, looking back on our life, number one, are we happy with the life that we live? Number two, do we have happiness because we cultivated a sense of love of pleasures of a higher order than simply the fleshly pleasures that are much more fleeting? And if we did that and we made those choices in the course of the period that we had before we got old, then we could have a lot of creative play and pleasure and good that you can still enjoy even when your body is hurting. And you're not like, the sexy beast that we once were as we were young, right? And that's fine, so, but then I think with the baby boomer, the post World War II generation, there were a lot of like new sociological phenomena that were artificially created by social engineers that induced society to create these weird phenomena like the midlife crisis thing. That's all of a sudden it became a sociological phenomenon of the baby boomer generation, where all of these people who ran away from the reality of thinking about their death all of a sudden came to terms when they hit 50 or so of like, oh my God, I'm not going to be forever. and they have this crisis of meltdown, divorce, break up the family, go for a Porsche, look for a trophy wife, try to like recapture your youth in some way. You got movies about, like American Beauty and stuff, just putting the flames on this nihilistic cultural dynamic with Kevin Spacey, just learning how to smoke weed again for the first time since the 70s, like it's just this, and like little nihilistic kids filming bags floating in the wind, acting like it's so profound and wanting to like run away. But there's all this like existential underpinnings in a lot of the film. But I think when you look at the type of, because film is a powerful thing, and you want to look at like film and arts that also edify and uplift. And one really good one is Queimada from 1968 with Marlon Brando playing the role of a British intelligence. Have you seen this? Queimada, Burn?
No.
Oh, it's such a good movie. It could probably be bought for like $5 on YouTube. Queimada. And so Marlon Brando plays like a British intelligence agent deployed to try to subdue a revolutionary tendency within sugarcane plantations in the Bermudas, some unnamed island colony, and install a puppet regime. And he has to sort of create a false hero that he can use and deploy as a counter-revolutionary. And it just goes through this beautiful exposure of the machinations of empire and how they work. But one of his own assets, this perfectly moldable counter-revolutionary that he selected and used to be it's gang, counter gang, right? Controlled operative stuff. All of a sudden awakens to his deeper humanity and falls off the reservation. And people have to watch this thing, but it basically is the most beautiful condemnation of the empire. And ultimately it showcases why empires are not going to be fit to survive in the long run, and why there's something more powerful in humanity, which cannot be ultimately crushed. It can be subdued for periods, but it can't be ultimately extinguished because it's too universal. It's too much based upon the universe as a whole and its expression within us as a being made in the image of a creative universe. Which is just, it's like not even a philosophical thought, like what I just said. People say, oh, that's your philosophical opinion. And it's like, that is my opinion, but there's a lot of scientific evidence backing up what I just said is a fact, as well as it being my opinion, that we are actually made in the image of the very laws that shape the universe that existed before we existed, before humanity. There were still those laws. And the very fact that humanity is the singular species on this earth that can discover those principles, those invisible determining factors. And on top of discovering them, like Ben Franklin being that one example, there's many, we can then willfully transform our behavior in harmony with those discovered laws in order to have greater freedom when we obey the laws that we discover. So when you discover a law of aerodynamics, you now have a greater freedom to fly. If you disobey the law of aerodynamics, it's your choice, but you wouldn't fly. You'd fall off you can't, you'd be stuck to the ground. So there's this wonderful reciprocity between freedom and law, which is already there in nature, and that we could willfully play with, and it works best when we're flexible, when we're creative, and the fear of death is one of the biggest holdups that block us from that peace and that creative flexibility that we can access. So it's only when we really do that we really find peace. And if you don't, people are always going to be looking for escapism and not ever able to make the leaps towards, as you said, from your buddy, the weightlifter, right? You won't be able to pierce through the fact that it's not just these exceptional individuals who are like somebody you could look upon like they were gods in awe or something. It's like, no, there's a little bit of that inside of all of us. They were just, in fact, I would say, rather than treat, Martin Luther King or Gandhi or anybody like they were the exceptions, maybe they were the norms. And we have not yet reached maturation as a species. So we've all been in this mediocre state that has been labeled normal to keep us mediocre. And maybe these are the individuals who tapped into their natural state.
And that they are just the average Joe.
Maybe they're the actually average of the future, right? Of what we could expect and should expect the standards to be in a mature.
It'd be like if you grew up in a concentration camp. And then you saw a GI on the outside, you'd be like, how buff is he? And it's like, dude, that's just a normal dude who has like 3 square meals, right?
Yeah.
And then you would realize, oh, you're in a camp being run by demons, like, right? Yeah. And like that guy's not even something special. That's you if you just weren't fed bread and water.
Yeah.
That's a wild thought.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're just holding us down artificially.
Yeah.
That's inspiring.
Yeah,
That's inspiring. It is. If it was 2,000 years ago, I was just thinking of this when you're talking. If this was 2,000 years ago and you were just in a robe talking, I'd follow you. I'd just be like, this guy's on to something. I'd follow you. I'd follow you. Be like, where are we going, man? Just let's go. I'd follow you. I'd ride your coattails as you preached.
No, it's a funny thing, right? Like, yeah, human beings are just we're a funny creature. We're a funny creature. We could be so cool. Like when you read Socrates or you read Plato or you read like you just look at what we've done. It's so miraculous and good.
Yeah.
And then we could just be so pathetic and tragic and like to convince these divine beings that they're just these like, pigs whose nature is just like roll in the mud. That's your nature. And it's like, no, you're these divine, beautiful beings and you're all like just rolling in the mud. Stop, like pull yourself out of it.
It's buying a brand new $5,000 iMac that can edit 8K video, and instead you just scroll Facebook on it. And it's like you are capable of power that Stanley Kubrick couldn't dream of, film editing. Instead, you're just scrolling through, and I like that. It is, but then that's like the free will dynamic, right? I mean, you can. There are days when you are, you're in a suit and tie, and you're at a wedding, and you're giving a speech, and you're there, and you're helping dancing with the grandma on the floor. It's like, and you're just being a total, just like a stud, like a good guy. And then there are days that like you're drinking before noon and like ordering McDonald's on Uber Eats, and you're like, this is also me, right? This is the duality of man, like, and it's not, one isn't inherently better than the other, but just take it all with a moderation. But I like what you said about we have the cognition to examine these laws that we are of, right? Before humanity, before DNA, there was still the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force. There were still oscillations and sine waves. There is something beautiful about, if we can examine those, we can come more into harmony with them. And yeah, I remember writing in my personal statement in medical school about like the one common theme of every religion, really at the core, is like do unto others as you'd like to have done to you. And like the one common theme of every science, organic chemistry, genetics, to astronomy, to whatever, just boil it all down, it really does come down to, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. And I was like, isn't that kind of insane that the two most core things of the spiritual and the physical are basically, what goes up must come down. What goes around comes around. And then if you can sink into that almost like base primitive law, you can sink into that. And by definition, everything in the universe is an outgrowth of that primal law of what goes up must come down, what goes around comes around. There's evil, there's good, there is light, there's dark, there's sadness. If you can examine that and then go, everything is part of that, from cars to icebergs to Netflix series to oatmeal. And you can like link up with that, and you'll still have problems and anxieties, but logic would deduce that you'll come more into harmony with the very reality you find yourself in, right?
Well said. No, I really like how you're able to take a lot of these big, giant concepts and just find like very identifiable examples on so many basic levels. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, there's something. I think that's one of the biggest problems in science. Like one of the things that in my research on the history of deep politics and oligarchical systems, that's sort of the approach I've taken, is that the battlefield has primarily been culture and the mind. That's the primary topology of the battlefield. And there's certain techniques of inducing the minds of target audiences to think that the false is true. There's certain techniques that have been used, and you could read the writings of a lot of ancient philosophers from 2,500 years ago and see them also retweaked, but the same ultimate ingredients done again in the medieval period by representatives of those same oligarchical systems. Or John Locke, you could see his defense of slavery and his logical reasoning why we don't have a soul and why we're just blank slates, tabula rasa. He's doing the same thing, ultimately for the pay and for the at the bequest of his sponsors and patrons, who are the same British East India Company and the British Royal Africa Company that is managing the entire, global slave trade of the 18th century, that he is an integral part of, and we've been told, oh yeah, the American Revolution was inspired by the theories of John Locke. Yeah, bullshit. I mean, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. When you actually read the writings of the best driving forces of the American Revolution, it was in total opposition to everything John Locke wrote and stood for, as far as the premise that inalienable rights exist in all people because we're made in the equal image of a creator.
Mm-hmm.
That is antithetical to John Locke. Sorry, no. Maybe Jefferson had his tendencies where, because he was the biggest slave owner in Virginia, he liked John Locke. He was a weaker link of the group. But overall, no, that was not the reason why. That we broke from that stuff.
Yeah.
So, there's certain, these techniques are, we can all understand them. They try to make it seem so inaccessible and like layered in these sophisticated arguments, and we're told, oh yeah, epistemology, that's the science of knowledge and the theory of knowledge, and you'll waste your life. Learn something practical, think about something more tangible. Don't waste your time with philosophy. There's no point in that. It's like, if these sorts of things have been put in our path to convince us to turn our minds off, because the reality is, if you think about it in the way that I'm talking about it and the way you've been talking about it, it's very intelligible. There have been very simple techniques to schism the individual subjective person. We're all subjective beings influenced by our feelings, our identity, these sense of honor, embarrassment, like all little elements of shame and hope and guilt and virtue and honor, all of these like non-linear but real qualities that you can't plot in a computer model are factors in our how we live our lives as physical beings living in a physical world, right? Consuming, contributing back to society, living and then dying. So we're part of a physical world with physical laws in the universe. There's golden sections organizing, proportions organizing galaxies as much as we see them involved in the behavior of atomic behavior and in our coffee when we pour milk in. Like you see that there's certain common traits on the big and on the small, and when we think about them, we can't extract who we are as an identity with feelings, and it's all part of because we're part of the thing we're exploring, right? And even Max Planck was very clear, and he's a guy who discovered the quantum domain. The realm of quantum physics was discovered by this guy working on black body radiation, and he's a musician, and he makes a point. Number one, the reason why he was able to make his discovery was because he was a pianist. And he makes a point, like his relationship with Mozart, with the mind of Beethoven, was an integrative part of how he was able to problem solve and look for creative anomaly, or zero in on the anomalies of what didn't fit with customary accepted standard models. So when you press those things into reality, there's cracks. Those are the singularities, the anomalies that a healthy mind should be thinking about, not, and then to solve the problem, to come up with a better hypothesis that is more in conformity with the actual law that causes those anomalies, which involved his discovery of the Planck constant and the harmonic, as he called it, harmonic oscillations involving the quantum realm. That opened up a whole new domain of power. So all of a sudden we could start using that concept, immaterial idea content, in order to act upon atomic behavior or atomic geometries that found that we could release immense amounts of energy that formerly, like uranium, was only used for like window tinting, limited. But now all of a sudden we found that with this knowledge, all of a sudden you could desalinate water, you could power things that could feed people, create abundance, or inversely create bombs that could kill people in abundance. So there's always this like, with new freedoms that the universe gives us, when we resonate, when we tune ourselves more, there's now more responsibility morally to not tolerate corruption and mediocrity. So you always have to have the sort of cultural field improve, at the very least in tandem, preferably faster, but ideally in tandem with the technological scientific field. They both have to sort of like grow together. If one falls out of equilibrium with the other, you could end up like in the ancient Athenians, where they had, for a period, a very robust cultural, intellectual environment, but they didn't have a lot of technology, so it was a bit lopsided. They were still using slaves. And then that decayed into empire and Peloponnesian War stuff, and that went to hell fast. Or inversely, like our world, you could go into a scientific dictatorship with idiot sociopaths who just want to use technology to enslave, rather than like look at China. China has taken the fourth industrial revolution idea, and there are bad things in China going on with technology. I'm not saying that, but look at, for example, 5 of the biggest hydroelectric dams in the world are built by China in the past 20 years. Okay. Right now, they're building one of the largest dams. It's 186 meters in height. I was just reading about this thing on online. It's going to be finished in 2024. There's not going to be a single human being participating in its construction. So how is that? It's 3D printed. They're 3D printing a friggin' hydroelectric dam. It's going to be something like 40 gigawatts of power. And every single layer that's being 3D printed, they have like automated pounders going up and down, like packing it in. The whole thing is being calibrated by a machine learning type of logarithmic system that can sort of calibrate according to anomalies you didn't expect. I don't think that they say no people. Maybe I think that there might be a couple of people involved at some point. It's hard to take the human element out entirely, but that is one expression of like a very different expression of fourth industrial revolution as a term, which is going to create massive water abundance, farming output, agricultural output's going to double in the regions that are going to be affected by the new reservoirs, new hydroelectric power that's going to eliminate poverty. Like incredible. In the West, here we just blew up 4 dams in California because we want to liberate the rivers of back to their natural ecosystems and bring the deserts back to their natural desert life. So we spent $500 million blowing up these dams built up by JFK in California. And the type of technology that we're permitting to go online for our fourth industrial revolution is basically all designed to enslave and make people dumber and more addicted to whatever type of drugs and video games that Yuval Harari says we have to use to deal with the useless eaters. So it's like a very different. We're creating scarcity with tech. They're using the same type of tech, machine learning, 3D printing, automation, and getting a very different outcome by creating abundance. And you got this whole battle over like, what are you going to do? Are you going to create mediocrity and scarcity, or are you going to create abundance and excellence? Are you going to have like real engineers with real knowledge being built up with your youth who have like a grounding in reality, who could build things and who can think positively about the future, which is what the majority of young people living in China actually have. It's very different from the young people in the West. They actually have hope for the future, and it's reasonable hope. Most young people here want to be YouTube stars. They don't care about exploring space anymore. That's like at the bottom of the list of all the surveys that were done. In China, it's the very opposite. Why? Because they actually have a robust space and nuclear program. They're making pioneering breakthroughs that are being assisted by Russia, China together, working on building lunar colonies that are going to be in place in 2035 to mine the moon for helium-3 for fusion power. My God, like that's cool shit that we used to do back when JFK was alive. We cut all that stuff off. We canceled NASA. Like we haven't done any, are there aliens in the world or in the universe? Yeah, probably. I mean, there's probably life out there somewhere. I mean, there's billions of other stars in our galaxy, other billions of other galaxies. I mean, likelihood, probably more life out there, and maybe, probably cognitive life elsewhere. Sure. But we're not going to know if we keep on tolerating the shutdown of space exploration, which we killed. We killed it for 40 years straight. So we've just been, opening the doors. Science fiction has taken over science. And so people have been just fed a line that space is where you go to die. It's where you go to have aliens kill you. And we lost the sense that like we're actually in space, like we're the Earth going in space around a sun in a galaxy, which is very vibrant and interesting. And it's our home. We lost that sense. It's just like, no, our home is this little tiny part of the feudal, plantation we're supposed to stay on. We're supposed to behave, and we've got the sea monsters. We got the sea monsters out there in the ocean that are gonna like eat us if we venture out too far from where we're allowed to exist. And that's like what Hollywood's given us, with that's a much better angle, dude. It looks so much more high tech from this angle. Why do you use the other angle?
I don't know, because I've got the good camera set up there, and it's whatever.
No, this is so much better.
Keep going on your rant. Keep going.
Yeah. Okay. But just so you know, like this is like the better angle in this. Yeah, absolutely.
Noted.
So, like all that to say, I'm just sort of again waxing maybe not so eloquent, but it's these different paradigms that are clashing. And I think the oligarchy, we know what they want, we know how they think, that we know what their desires are, and we know what their weaknesses are in general. So we have to look at like where is the idea content activating into policy action, which is action in the world today or in the past, that has diminished their power and has increased our capacities to be ourselves, to discover the universe, and at the same time discover ourselves as we tune to that universe. Where is that happening today? And I'll tell you straight up, Russia, China, increasingly Iran, increasingly India. Those are the countries that are actually putting online policies that are anti-Malthusian, anti-degrowth, anti-scarcity creation. And they're creating new types of systems of relationships that are pissing the fuck off of the oligarchy, and at the same time increasing the danger of an actual war, because the oligarchy recognizes that they kind of have a limited amount of time to try to like get everything back on a script, because the system that they created is designed to blow up too. So that's a part of the timeline that they have to work with, which creates a sort of hecticness. And I think a lot of the irrational, like weird shit we're seeing with balloons and UFOs and trains, and there's so much desperation and almost like just absurd. There's a Monty Python-esque quality peppering the landscape right now. And I think it has to do with the hecticness of the oligarchy themselves, kind of like losing their shit a little bit. Yeah, which gives me a bit of hope in some ways.
Yeah, it does kind of seem like they're trying to make 2030 happen in 2020.
Yeah,
it kind of feels like for whatever reason there was an anomaly that they didn't foresee, and they are very good planners, but there is this feeling of like typing the book report the morning of it's due, right? There is kind of this feeling of fuck it, just just like, and it's like, but it's like such a like a traditionally good student doing this. It's like you're a straight A student, and the teacher being like, what is something going on? Like what this is shit. Like you normally are so like fine-tuned, and now you're just handing in dog shit. Typos and run-on sentences, and you're not even
are you on drugs or what's going on?
It's just you're maybe I need to talk to the parent, because it's such a bright young student. Now in this case we're talking about the demonic psychopaths, but you almost want to like go talk to them and be like, hey Klaus, is everything good at home? Are your parents beating you? Like, because you have been planning things so much. Like, go to the CIA and be like, do you guys want to maybe talk? Like, you guys have been so efficiently massacring, just genocides over the decades and shooting democratically elected leaders, and you're just bungling it all right now. And it's very uncharacteristic of you guys. Like, do you want to share what's on your mind? Like,
dude, Tommy, that's hilarious, man.
But it is like
somebody should do a skit on this though. No, it's like that is.
But then like you almost don't want to intervene because they are demons. Yeah. But I don't think it's necessarily like good that they're rushing, because it's not like, the demons are losing. Like, no, they won't lose. They would rather turn in an F paper than turn in nothing, and they will. If they have to make 2030 done by 2023, they'll do it, sloppy mistakes and all.
Well, see, so again, here's and I'd suggest people read, if they can, if they can buy my book on Amazon. I'm sorry, I have it on Amazon, or the PDF on my website. Buy it. If you can't, email me and I'll send you a free PDF, because I know times are tough, economy shit. I get it. So
Matt, email me the links to the book so I can put them in the description, because I realized I didn't do that last time.
Yeah, okay. What I try to do, especially in volume 2 of the series and volume 4, kind of a satanic thing, but volume 2 and volume 4 is to try to shed light on those points when the oligarchy, because they're really good at planning. It's like theory and practice. Often it looks good on paper. It looks good when you game it. It looks good in the ivory tower and the blackboard, and then you do it. And they're pretty good in the theory side of things, and bringing about the configuration. They're good at the lies, the subterfuge, the Byzantine intrigue, all of that stuff. They've honed those skill sets quite well. Narrative creating, myth making, artificial, like all these things. But then when it comes to execution side, when it really comes down to action, history is peppered with them fucking up.
Yeah.
The oligarchy creates shit that blows up in their face all the time. Like, you can't understand properly anything of history unless you are aware of this, and then you're like, oh, that's what I'm looking at. Because why did the there's so many examples. Like, okay, why did the Roman Empire collapse? Why did the Western Roman Empire collapse? Why did it not become the forever empire? No, the 400, the Visigoths and the Vandals, came in. Well, first the Visigoths, then the Vandals later on in 450. It was annihilated. Now, the oligarchical families that were dominant for about like 8 centuries, some longer probably, they didn't benefit. A lot of them stabbed each other in the back, like there were rapes, their shit was stolen. Some of them just took what they could carry, left the Roman Senate, the Roman, oligarchical command centers, and had to like remigrate, have like a migration to like swamplands in Venice, and slowly it took them several centuries just to start reconstructing themselves and building back some of their power base. And it took like, I'm talking here like it probably was the 13th century where they finally were able to like assert themselves as a dominant world force. But they messed up so badly. They didn't have to have that conclusion. They could have abided by the way St. Augustine laid it out in the City of God. He's like, look, there's a city of man and a city of God. To the degree that the city of man acts and creates laws in accordance with the city of God, we're okay. We're abiding by natural law, or we will not collapse. To the degree that we act in defiance and use laws for the benefit of a master class in opposition to the laws of morality, well, then those laws simply become a form of violence, and we plant the seeds of our own ultimate self-destruction, self-annihilation, which is exactly what Rome did by becoming this monstrous, dependent system that relied ever more on slave labor, extraction of wealth, and the stupidification of people in the capital that started celebrating fucking holidays 230 days of the year and became just a bunch of useless eaters who didn't know how to like do anything anymore. So that whole thing, that didn't have to happen, but it did have to happen in the sense that if we willfully held on to our folly, yeah, it had to go the way it did. And so same thing with like Hitler. It sounded like a good idea, like let's have Wall Street, City of London, pour resources, everything possible to bring in fascism in the 20th century. That'll be a really great way of organizing society, with strongman enforcers, imposing a banker's will upon the masses of the world and turning Russia into slave plantation, China, Africa into slave plantations. And basically it was going to be a one world government with fascist enforcers at different jurisdictions. That was the thing. Sounded nice. And, the King of England was a Nazi king teaching Queen Elizabeth how to do a Nazi salute. And, Neville Chamberlain, Nazi, and Lloyd George Roundtable Movement, member, Nazi, all of them. These are the same guys who are creating things like, political Zionism, creating a state of chaos in a geopolitical zone in the Middle East. All of they're creating radical Islam, the Muslim Brotherhood. They're creating these sorts of different radicalized ideologies to sort of just fight each other in a state of perpetual war forever to better manage the chaos, and it looked good. But then when it came down to execution, Hitler was like, okay, they're Frankenstein monster, started listening to his generals and was like, wait a minute, you mean I with this military power that I have now at my disposal, I don't have to be the junior partner in a new world order taking commands anymore. I could be the one as the dominant senior figure in the game, and the British could take my commands? Really? Let's do that instead. And all of a sudden, some of the oligarchs in Britain were like, yeah, I guess we have to do this. We don't have a choice. We put decades into making this happen. And then other ones were like, no, we're not going to tolerate this. But it didn't benefit them. They got wiped out economically. Like that was a big hit that Britain took to sort of abort their Frankenstein machine, and then live to fight another day, try to reconstruct again, and again, it looked all elegant for the decades prior to, and then it happens, action blows up.
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of the same thing that we're seeing right now. Looked all good for decades. Script's not working anymore.
I think that's probably, the World Economic Forum plan. It just they've got great flow charts. They've got, you go to the website, man, they've got nice, great high resolution. You're like, oh yeah, it makes sense. But you look at it and you're like, is it going to work out? Like, is it going to work out? Like, there's always just an anomaly that, like, Dan Carlin's Blueprints for Armageddon, which is, I think, the best it's like a 6-part podcast, 4 hours each, about what led up to and then World War I. It's called Blueprints for Armageddon. It's better than any audiobook I've ever listened to. It is it is incredible. But he talks about just like the majesty of like the Kaiser army and how they had down to the clockwork, they had how many boots would be passing this bridge at this time whenever they enacted the Schlieffen plan, and on these trains and this number of carts with this number of ammo, and it would be happening here, and then it just clockwork. And then the war started, and like one of the bridges was like, I don't know, out of commission or something, and like one of the trains just had to stop. And they were like, what the fuck is this? And then like it stopped. And they're like, well, if this one doesn't get here within 8 minutes of this window, then this is not going to happen here. And it wasn't even like it was sabotage. It was just like no one had gone and inspected the bridge or some shit. And it was like, yeah, it's kind of broken. And they just like lost their shit. And like that was before the war even started. And then things like sabotage started happening. And their miraculous Swiss watch machine of how they were going to take over Europe, it just exploded. It's like those early like Redstone rocket arsenal videos you see where it's not even the rocket that goes up and crashes. It's just like 3, 2, 1, lift, and the thing just explodes. You can find those old videos from the 50s. They don't even leave the launch pad. They're like 3, 2, 1. It's just like they just turn the ignition and the car, and like that kind of happened. And I think the World Economic Forum plan, like Agenda 2030, it's like they had everything lined up. And then there was just like these weird anomalies. No one, like, I don't think they thought Trump was going to get in office. And they're like, well, what the fuck is this? There's a guy with a fake tan and like 3 ex-wives, and he's just running on like a platform that Mexicans are rapists, and he wins. Like, I don't think they were planning on that. Like, he went to North Korea and like shook, huh?
Have like chicken wings with
he's eating like a Big Mac with a knife and fork on Air Force One. What?
Yeah.
Huh? Like, what the fuck's going on? Like he recognizes Jerusalem or some shit. Like there's just there's just a mechanism somewhere in this elaborate machine. Like in NORAD, like there was like a coding error where instead of having zeros, they used 2s. And only in one column. And so they're doing like a war game test, and it said 2 ICBMs were incoming. And then it said 20 were incoming. And then it said 22 were coming. Then it said 222. And then it said 2,222. And like they called up like the national security advisor, like the president was being whisked away to a bunker. And then finally someone's like, it's saying only 2s. Like, hold on. And like we stood our like alert forces down because we realized, but think about that. Like the elaborate intricacies of this war machine under a mountain of granite to survive everything almost nuked the world because like one coding line was off. Why wouldn't that happen again in reality? Their plan is so intricate that it's just like they weren't expecting like Kanye to turn into a Nazi, and like that might have been the variable that fucked it. They didn't know Rogan was going to smoke pot with Elon Musk. Like there's some butterfly effect shit in there.
No, there absolutely.
It's just something happened. Like they just weren't expecting it.
Well, it's I mean, it's humanity is a lot, in some ways, a lot less complicated than they want us to believe humanity is. Like there's a certain elegant simplicity to humanity and a certain nonlinearity to it, which they can't understand because they want to try to formalize, mathematize everything. And at the same time as they want to do that, they then want to talk about like that exact moment when the singularity is going to happen, which they say is exactly proven at 2050, which is when, computing technology is going to supersede human thought. And then all of a sudden we're going to go obsolete. So we have to merge with the machines now and do CRISPR and integrate with the machines at the brain and to stay relevant, or else, and it's like, how you guys can't even get like more than 30% effectiveness in terms of photovoltaic cells turning solar energy into something kind of useful as far as like moving electrons. Like you're so limited in even getting a fraction of the effectiveness of what a basic leaf can do on a tree as far as just utilizing chlorophyll and photosynthesis. You are so far down, but you're already talking about the moment when we will be able to
become
upload
digital gods.
Upload our digital souls into mainframes in the clouds, no longer heaven, where we now can cheat death maybe at some point download those digitized souls into future beautiful bodies that'll be developed out of synthetic, silicon and shit, maybe in a 1,000 years. And in the interim, we're the last generation to experience death, right? Is what they want to tell themselves. And then the worst thing is a lot of people who don't like these oligarchical psychopaths end up believing their own self-propaganda and start giving them or attributing to these guys the power of the gods that they themselves actually don't have, but they want to have. And we undermine our own power and potency in face of that. But if you look at the American founding fathers, it's exactly what, or the revolutionaries that fought against the world's biggest empire in 1776 to 83 or 80, 81, sorry. But how did they do that miraculous thing with a bunch of like untrained farmers who went to war with this empire? Muskets and
wood teeth, just drinking whiskey, like.
Yeah, like, no, I mean, but the empire did exactly what you just mentioned regarding the Kaiser's army of the 19th century. Is like they had overly formalized themselves in the art of war.
Yeah,
and they were walking these perfect formations and shit. Yeah,
and these assholes from New England, the original like massholes, were just like, let's hide in the fucking woods, guy. Like, like hopped out, just hatcheted them to death. And they're like, this is improper. And George Washington was like, fuck yeah. Hey, let's go across a river in a canoe on Christmas Eve and just kill them all. All right. He's like, what? This is not what formal men do.
I don't see this in any of the pages of the rule book. What
it's just fuck around and find a bunch of illiterate farmers from the woods who just
or Taliban, right? How did the Taliban kick the ass of the US military after
20 years? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, same kind of principle. I'm not a big fan of Taliban, but I mean,
no, but it's
principle was being acted upon there, and the same problem in the mind of the dominant power was its own downfall.
Back to we gotta wrap this up in like a minute. And I'll make sure to email me those books, and then we'll schedule another one. But there was like what you're saying about identifying these kind of laws of the universe that we are arisen from. Well, another thing about the universe is like DNA recombination. Like it never wants all the eggs in one basket. It's even there's humans, there's birds, there's animals, there's fish 15,000 feet underwater that look like aliens. Like no one has a more diversified portfolio than Mother Nature, right? They have shown they don't like putting all their eggs in one basket. That would then play out in human society, where there's almost some sort of natural, as you approach the speed of light, it gets harder and harder to accelerate. It's almost like as an empire gets to the cusp of global hegemony, every additional inch is like harder than the previous 1,000 miles. And then the gradient is in favor of like the toothless guys in like New Hampshire with hatchets. Like they're just like, I don't know, go fucking hack these like assholes who are walking in an organized line. Like, just go take their shit, whatever. Like, and then 250 years later, as we become the hedge, there are all these feedback cycles that are like, no, you can't do that. It's almost like it's woven in that it doesn't want too much power in one spot. And a lot of nations just stay in the middle ground. But whenever like China, Russia, and America, like no one will ever run the whole thing. Like America kind of did in the 90s by like virtue of forfeiture.
Yeah.
But they didn't do it. And even then we ran it for 11 years and then 9/11, right? And we got pulled into a quagmire in the Middle East. Like it almost seems like it's a law that nature doesn't want all the power in one ideology or empire. Yeah, but
there's always going to be like centers of, I think, economic gravity.
Sure.
But you're never going to, absolutely not. And that's why you need to have people say like, well, why do I support nation states? It's like, well, because they originated out of, and then I'll wrap it up. I know we have to stop.
Yeah.
They originated out of a process of human beings organizing to take collective action in defense of our own freedom against those who would wish to enslave us, who had a lot of power. So it was really convenient to do that. And it works so well that the oligarchy has been working for about 500 years to destroy and undermine and undo what we did with the creation of the sovereign nation state by infiltration, getting the things to act like, they're obviously having a nation state do things with political power is going to be bad if it's run by the same death cultists who the nation state was created to stop in the first place. Obviously, now the problem is a lot of people then say, oh, but the nation state is the problem. If we just get rid of nation states, and then you have this weird convergence with like a lot of freedom-loving anarchists who are all over the place, and a lot of my friends are anarchists who hate the oligarchy, hate the Great Reset, hate world government, but are ultimately also in agreement with the Great Reset that we should get rid of nation states with a different outcome that they want. They just want to have little micro communities everywhere. But I think like the thing that's left out is the cultural field. Because if you have a culture of excellence and like a natural moral culture animating our development as individuals who grow in and will eventually die, then we don't need external laws to force us to do anything, you know, because we're guided by internal senses of desiring to do the good. JFK, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, type of thing. So you increasingly don't need, for anarchism to work in a proper way, you need to have a very, very excellent quality of standards and culture so that people will want to do what is good for the collective. To the degree that there's a dichotomy, if people are regressive and mediocritized and made like just like, you know, selfish guppies or you know, goldfish who have no memory and just want to live for sensual passions, first of all, you can never have a democracy if that's the case, because nobody's going to know what the hell is actually pulling the levers of their own. They won't know where their convictions are coming from. They won't even care. They just want to whatever. Yeah. So you need to have that maintained. And if we do that, then yeah, we can have different cultures working together and we'll be natural problem solvers. You put little kids in a room together under the age of 2 and they'll play together. They'll play games together. They won't see color. Humans in a mature way should also be, and I think we are that way too. We'll like, you know, like, oh, you have kids in your land that you would like to have a better life and access fresh water and have electricity. We do too. Let's figure, we got this like water flowing through, you know, the border that passes through our nations that could be like hydroelectric energy for both of us. Well, maybe let's work on building something that's going to win-win, benefit both, you know? And I think that would be our natural orientation and not just fight each other if we didn't have these arsonists lighting fires and you know, inflaming prejudices, causing all of this grief all the time. So anyway, yeah, I think the oligarchy is a lot less powerful in that sense than they want us to believe. But at the same time, we are also more powerful than we think we are.
Yeah.
So it's good.
If the quote, if the situation was hopeless, their propaganda wouldn't be necessary.
Oh, that's good.
Not mine, but I'll take credit for it.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Mr. Matthew Ehret, thank you, sir. We got to wrap this one up. Email me the links to those books. I'll copy and paste and put them in the description. And then I will get back to you later and we'll schedule the next one.
Sounds good.
Thanks so much for your time, man.